Hello, welcome to Tales from the Bridge. My name is Tristan.
I'm James.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Hannah.
The first thing we're going to do today is talk about some honorable mentions for other sci-fi movies that start with D.
And there's some pretty good ones.
After that, we're going to get to the film of the month, which is my pick this month. And I chose a cult classic from 2001 that I've never seen until recently, Donnie Darko.
And if you can, subscribe and follow Tales from the Bridge wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review or a rating. We would love to hear from you. Write us an email if you want with any film recommendations or book recommendations. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, today we have Hannah, someone new joining us on the bridge. Hannah, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I am a huge Donnie Darko fan, so I'm going to try and hold back from gushing about this film too much, but really excited to have this conversation.
All right, let's make our way over to the bridge. All right, guys, let's start off with talking about some films that start with the letter D. I'm just going to name a couple. I'm sure you guys have some too. One that I have is really obscure. I don't know how many people have seen this, but from 1985, Daryl, Daryl. I believe the title was Data Analyzing Robotic Youth Life Form. It was with the child actor that was in the Neverending Story about the kid robot. Do you guys remember that one?
I only remember it because of you.
Really? Did you
Yeah.
guys watch? Hannah, did you see this? James, you guys saw this film?
I hate to admit, no. I remember
Okay.
the title, but I did not see it.
No one
Yeah,
has
same. I
seen it.
think I remember the title.
Okay. Well, I watched it 100 times when I was a kid. I don't know if we owned it on VHS or if my dad rented it multiple times, but I just feel like I watched it a lot. So Dark City is another one I'll throw. Remember Dark City? It came
Oh,
out just
yeah.
before The Matrix, and it kind of had a lot of similarities to it. That was a good one.
Was that the one where they were like, basically people didn't realize that they being like paused at night and like kind of sort of experimented on or something? Like people's reality
Yeah,
wasn't that sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah. With
Remember
Kiefer
that one?
Sutherland
Yes.
and
Yeah, yeah. It's kind
the
of film
dark,
noir style,
very yes,
trench
very dark.
coats and fedoras and yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
What else you guys got?
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't call out Dune, I think, original and otherwise, in all its iterations.
Now
Um,
Oscar nominated Dune as well.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And rightly so. I'm a big fan of the new canon that they've got going on. But that and District 9 were my two shout outs. I had to put District 9 out. That was one of the more, I don't know, more modern ones that really sort of put me on my butt when it first came out. It just felt so different and the writing was so strong and yeah, so subtly futuristic, if that makes sense. It just yeah, it's great.
And I remember watching that when it first came out and being amazed by the special effects. Like those
Yeah,
aliens looked so
yeah,
good. Like that was a bit shocking how good that film looked.
Especially for the time as well. It was such a low budget movie comparative to the other films that were coming out with similar quality visual effects. And what Blomkamp managed to achieve with that was just unreal.
Hannah, what about you? What are your movies? You're our guest tonight, so let's hear what you've got.
Yeah, to be honest, District 9 was the only one that's on my list. Something else that I maybe should have mentioned when I introduced myself is that I am a film fan, but as long as it was made in like 1985 onwards, then it will be on my radar. Other than that, maybe you can't really call me a true fanatic because films prior to 1985, I just kind of I struggle to have patience for. So I'm a pop culture girly. I like my more recent flicks and District 9. To be honest with you, like any sci-fi film beginning with D, I feel like it had to be Donnie Darko or District 9, right?
For sure, I agree. Yeah.
Well, mine are both a little bit apocalyptic. Sticking with the Jake Gyllenhaal theme, we've got The Day After Tomorrow that I picked as well too, that I've only seen one time, but is a bit of a climate change, end of the world on steroids kind of film. If you haven't seen that, again with the young Jake, and then Deep Impact from 1998. So both within your timeline, Hannah. I think you've probably seen those. Yes.
Yeah, no, fair. And to be honest, like for some reason when I think sci-fi, I kind of think like space. But no, yeah, Deep Impact, awesome. Young, that's the one with Elijah Wood, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Young Elijah
Big
Wood.
cast.
And
Huge
Yeah.
cast on that one.
Big one.
And Day After Tomorrow, I think I've seen too many times for it to be healthy. Like, I think I've probably seen it the same amount of times that a Doomsday Prepper has seen that film.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, it is funny too, because like the genre of both those movies, I would almost classify as like disaster movies, and I only say that as someone who is like unhealthily addicted to disaster movies and like world-ending catastrophe movies. I just for some reason can't get enough of them, and that was like that, and that whole time period was just like flush with them, right? Like it was,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was either an asteroid that was going to get us, or it was weather that was going to get us, or it was, yeah, it was, yeah, yeah.
Feels like a simpler time, doesn't it?
It
Here in
does, yeah,
2025.
it does, yeah. But it was kind of fun to watch that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and totally agreed that they're disaster movies as well. But I think they're kind of hybrid as well too. Like we've talked about in the past, that
For sure.
Back to the Future is kind of a sci-fi hybrid with teen coming of age slash comedy slash whatever. I think it's got these two, Day After and Deep Impact are kind of disaster, one foot in the disaster pool and the other in the sci-fi pool, but they were on online lists, so that's why I'm going for those for my picks.
Totally. Yeah, no, love it.
One film that's considered one of the great science fiction films of all time is The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951, which is it holds up. Like it's obviously slower than a film you'd get these days, but I like that one.
Now I feel like I'm conflating films, but that wasn't the one that was the radio play that people thought was real, was it?
No,
No,
that's
that would
the
have
War of the
been
Worlds.
War of the Worlds. Thank you. Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's a modern Tom Cruise vehicle in terms of remakes.
And Steven
That's right.
Spielberg.
That's right. That's
I
right.
think the first half of that film was fantastic. Remember the scene where they first discovered the first tripod in, you don't remember that one? That when they first
I-
discovered the tripod in the asphalt in the city. Do you
Oh
remember that
yeah.
sequence where it's chasing them and it's like zapping people and they turn to dust? That is
It's amazing.
It's
it's a
Yeah.
really
intense.
great sequence. Even the first hour of that film is fantastic, and then it
Yeah.
just kind of yeah,
Yeah, really
Yeah.
harrowing. I like this. Then he gets back to the house with his kids, and he's like dusting off other people
yes,
from his jacket. It's
yes,
pretty.
yeah,
That's
No,
right.
honestly another one of my favorites. I don't mind. Like I know people have issues with it losing its way a little bit, but Tom Cruise running always does it for me. I do judge
yeah,
me if you want to. And then Spielberg's in there, Aliens, tick, tick, tick. Love the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Nice.
And then I also have to say one of my favorites, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. I mean, they're not heavy science fiction, but they really are, you know?
I
Probably
think
falls
that's
more
another.
into like the superhero. Because I was going to mention Doctor Strange, but then we kind of are going down a whole different path of Marvel superhero. We draw the line. They get enough credit.
Yeah, I think it's another hybrid though. I think especially the Dark Knight films kind of qualify because there's some sciency stuff and there's some good fiction stuff. And yeah, I saw I saw the Doctor Strange stuff on lists as well too. But yeah, they occupy a different space for me. But I agree. But I would agree with Tristan. I think the Dark Knight films, and again, I mean those, especially the Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's performance and just the direction and the intensity of that movie is hard to it's hard to just not talk about. It's so great, It's I think it's worth mentioning even if it is on the fringe a little bit. So yeah. Okay, so yep, it was my turn to pick the movie, and with the letter D, I did my due diligence and looked online to see. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. Looked online to see what something different that I could come up with. I wanted not to go to the expected Dune because that's been sort of the buzz and everyone's talking about it all the time. And in checking the lists online, I ran across one list and that listed Donnie Darko as a science fiction movie. And this is one of those movies. It's clearly been a cult movie for a couple of decades now. It's one of the films that I should have seen, but going back all that time, I had never seen it. I can't explain why, or I couldn't explain why until I did watch it and started doing a little research and realized why. And you guys will probably remember this, but we'll talk about that later. But for those like me who hadn't seen or haven't seen Donnie Darko, the IMDb uh, summary of this film is After narrowly escaping a bizarre accident, a troubled teenager is plagued by visions of a man in a large rabbit suit who manipulates him to commit a series of crimes. So that's one take. Uh, and then there's other takes. I found this film, just to dive in, both astonishing and baffling and frustrating and confusing, um, kind of inspiring at times as well too. Um, but for those of us, I'll just give the rundown. So this is a 2001 film from the United States, described as a science fiction psychological thriller. It was written and directed by Richard Kelly. And I'm going to give the shout out. Being a film school grad, I'm going to give the shout out to some of the other crew. So the DOP, director of photography, was Stephen either Poster or Poster. Apologies, Stephen. Edited by Sam Bauer and Eric Strand. Music, which is a phenomenal part of this movie, actually, is by Michael Andrews. And I also got to give a huge shout out to the music supervisors of this film, who were Manish Raval, again, hopefully I've got the pronunciation right, and Tom Wolfe. Because if anything, I think the soundtrack to this movie, as well as the score, are some of the big achievements of this film. Beyond the narrative, beyond kickstarting maybe some careers and having a kind of an amazing cast. But yeah, the film itself is set in 1988. It follows Donnie Darko. We pick up with this young man, Jake Gyllenhaal, in his 20s. I think he was in his 20s or maybe his late teens at that point, who is asleep or unconscious on sort of a mountain highway or road, wakes up, gets on his bike, and then rides home. And it just gets stranger from there. I don't really want to. If you guys are okay with this, I don't want to give away a ton of spoilers for this review. I think we should get into it to a certain degree. But for those of our listeners who haven't seen this movie, I want to save the ending for them. So let's agree to do that if we can, just because it is a journey. And to go with this cast that includes people like Jake Gyllenhaal and Jenna Malone, Drew Barrymore, Mary McDonnell, who is another sci-fi veteran from Battlestar Galactica, Catherine Ross, Patrick Swayze, of all people, and Noah Wiley. And then I was shocked to even see a young Seth Rogen as the bully, or one of the bullies, the high school bullies. So this film has so many ingredients, both production wise and narratively. Um, and I don't know how Richard Kelly did it. The lore goes that he was writing. He was right out of film school in Southern California. Started writing to get his start in the industry. Came up with this idea. Started pitching. I don't know how he did it. Again, as a film school graduate myself, at the tender age of 24 or 25, 26, whatever he was, to get out there, write a screenplay like this, have the authority and the nerve and the balls to be able to sell this, get it produced, and then attach himself as director. I'm not quite sure how he managed to pull that off. Um, to be honest, I think it may be a bit of a for better or for worse story, because as interesting and unique as the film is, uh, I also think it's a bit of a mess as well too. There is a bit of it has a bit of a film school feel to it. And we were talking before we hit record about the theatrical cut versus the director's cut, which came out after it became a bit of a cult classic. And I can see, that there is certainly something to the director's vision, but I also do feel like sometimes directors are well served by having boundaries, and having people to guide their vision when it may be a little out of control. So this film, goes in all sorts of strange directions. Again, without giving a play-by-play of, Donnie, this young man, having troubles with his family, troubles with his schoolmates. He's clearly got some mental health issues. But then there's clearly more to it than that. There's a supernatural angle. There's a I don't even know how to describe it angle of this the iconic giant death's head bunny rabbit that is sort of his occasional visitor or companion or his weird Yoda. I'm not sure even how to describe Frank, but um, yeah, it's a really interesting film. I can see why it's gained cult status. Um, One of the reasons, again, going back to the soundtrack, like I don't know, on a what was it? I think it was like a $4.2 million budget that they pulled this off. But then they put together this soundtrack with uh, Tears for Fears, Duran Duran, Oingo Boingo, Echo and the Bunnymen, like some incredible bands from the 80s and 90s. And then probably most significantly, this film also gifted us the remake or the redo of Mad World, the Tears for Fears songs by Gary Jules. And Michael Andrews, which is a phenomenal remake and stands in its own right. But yeah, I wonder if it wasn't for that and for all of the elements, if this film wouldn't have taken on the cult quality and the cult status that it has. But I almost feel a little bit guilty in saying, I don't get it, and I wish I did. There's a lot there that I think could have been stitched together with a perhaps a more experienced storyteller, but that's not how it went. So I'm gonna let the rest of the dissection go to you guys.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing your what you think, James, because for me, I saw this film over 20 years ago, and I would have seen it at a time where it was a I was, it was 2001, so I would have been 18 years old. So just imagine seeing this film when you're 18 years old and you're into science fiction. There's three stages for this film with me over the past 20 years, and so to start, when I saw it, I was like, okay, that movie was awesome. I'd never seen anything like it because I was just starting to get into David Lynch movies. And something that David Lynch would say and David Kelly has said is don't worry about what it's about, and if you need to make sense of it or make a story of it, then come up with one yourself. This is supposed to be something that you interpret. It's not so when you say it's a mess, I can very much say, yeah, it's totally a mess. And in my middle stage, my second stage, I would have agreed and said, what a messy film. So my first stage was, yeah, this is a really cool film. My second stage was, that is an overrated film. Why does everyone like that so much? And that's where I've been for years. Rewatched it a few years ago, and I remember, I feel like it was a year or two ago I watched it and was like, yeah, that's a little bit overrated. It's just a cool movie. And then I just entered my third stage, which is I rewatched it a couple days ago because of us talking about it tonight, and I fucking loved it. Like I am still excited about it. I'm really amazed at how this film has done this. Like the three stages that I went through. Like what the hell? I've never seen a film. A film's never done this for me. Um, and I think it's also because now I have seen many David Lynch films and some experimental films that don't really have a narrative that works the way most popular films do. So there is a lot of coming up with it yourself. And just for a little bit of, just to make you feel old here, guys, this movie came out in 2001 and it was supposed to be 1986, correct? I believe. Um, I could be off.
88, I think. I think it's
88.
88, but
No,
but close,
right.
same diff, sort of.
Well, that even helps with this. So it's 2001, but it's only showing a story from 13 years before, guys. The same distance from Donnie Darko the movie being made to where the year it was depicting is the same as now to 2012. Like that doesn't make sense.
Why
Um,
you got to do that? Don't do that to us.
yeah. But it really captured the 80s and those musical montages. When you go to the high school for the first time, that musical montage with I think that's the Tears for Fears song, right? Or no, that's Echo.
That's head over
Uh,
heels.
That's Echo in the
yeah. That's head over heels. Yeah.
That is so good, and it's filmed so well. And then it pans to
It's
the girls.
iconic.
It's unbelievable. It shows all the teachers. It You understand the characters immediately. The way it goes over and pans the girls doing the dance routine, it almost like this is 2001. It almost feels like reminded me a little bit of Napoleon Dynamite, how it captured those awkward, nerdy characters, but showed them in such a real, sad way. Um, I'm blown away by that. The dad character is hilarious, and he's got barely any lines, but he's so funny. He's so irresponsible, which is perfect for the story. I don't know if you guys remember this. When the family's in the hotel, the dad says, "Do you remember Frankie Fiedler?" And he died. Like who? Why?
They said he was doomed. I really like
Yeah,
that because I think it's such a reflection on Donnie, because he says it. They said, geez, they could be saying that about Donnie because the jet engine fell in his room, but of course Donnie
yeah.
wasn't there. He was out sleepwalking. And I do think that there's a lot of subtext to that conversation because my feeling on it is Donnie is doomed. That's his whole
Well, yeah.
theme throughout this entire film. He's doomed. He's never had the chance to reach his potential to fulfill his kind of teenage dreams or wishes. And so this event, whatever you want to occur it, the things that Frank advises him to do and enables him to do is his chance to kind of fulfill his life, which is doomed, which is the world's gonna end. Donnie's world's gonna end. And so I just find it really interesting that this throwaway line that this father has is actually a real good summation of the entire character of Donnie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It also, and I didn't notice it until the second time I watched it. It identifies who Frank actually is in their world. Okay, so when they're in the movie theater and he's talking to Frank, he asks him why that's his name. He said it's because it was my father's name. So the guy they're talking
Oh,
about who
that's
died on
right.
the way to the prom was Frank's dad.
Sorry, I was like Frankie Fiedler. I
Yeah.
think that's what the father
Fiedler.
said.
So the kid that is Frank at the end, that is his father. So he is tied directly into this path of
Yep.
doom. This
So wait, he knocked up Frank's mum before prom? Eh? Scandalous. 80s, a different time.
because yeah, because I did always wonder why they had that line of like it was my father and his name before me. I was like,
Yeah.
what's that? Why
Well,
would they?
he is much older than Donnie too, right? That makes total
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, those Patrick Swayze VHS tapes that he shows of the classes, they're so funny. That doesn't belong in this film. How is it so funny and this movie can be so dark and depressing? Unbelievable.
The horse whinnying in the infomercials in
Yeah.
between the scene cuts. I
Oh
love
my
it.
God. Yeah.
It's
No.
amazing. These tiny details that are just
Oh,
so
it's
cringy,
yeah.
beautiful.
Yep.
And it's such perfect satire, right? Of that self-help culture, right? And just the troubling nature of it and the cheesiness and like you say, the cringe. So much cringe. Yeah.
Hmm. I do think that the film is a little bit about the search for God. It's a search for understanding, and that's what Donnie's doing the whole way. He's trying to understand what's going on, which I think we're all kind of doing. So it's a very relatable. Um, I love how there's a couple connections to Watership Down, one of my favorite books when I was a teenager, young boy. That was also a dark, depressing story, but you just loved the characters. You wanted to see them survive, and that is a kind of the same story, right? Which is like a doomed area, and we've got to escape, and we've got to find a new place to go. Um, and the fact that the main character is a bunny rabbit is links to that as well. Um, it is interesting how I don't quite understand why the doctor gave him placebo pills. It's like, wait a minute, this kid actually needs medication. Like, why are you giving him placebos?
So wait,
Uh,
didn't they just reveal that in the director's cut though? I don't think that was in the original.
yeah, I have to admit, if I saw the theatrical, that would have been when it first came out on DVD, because I don't think anyone saw this movie in the theater because it made like $2 million or something and that's a little tidbit for you. It came out was supposed to come out right when 9/11 hit, and preview that they had edited had a lot of airplane crashing stuff in it, so they just took it out, and no one went to the theater to see this movie, so it kind of bombed. But yeah, so that's in the director's cut. I really only feel familiar with the director's cut, so um,
The
See,
thing
well,
I
that's
think. Oh,
controversial, I feel like,
sorry.
because a lot of may I say true die Donnie Darko fans really dismiss the director's cut for a couple of reasons. One major reason is that the soundtrack is just terrible by comparison. It really detracts from the strength of the original theatrical release. But also, there is a lot of commentary saying that the reason why the director's cut was came out was because fans were just demanding to know what what did we just watch? Like I'm sure you guys felt the same way. As soon as this film ended, I watched it again immediately. I was like, well, I don't know what's happening. I need to watch this again. And I feel like everyone does that with this film. That's everyone's experience of this film. They watch it 2 or 3 times just to try and begin to get their head around it. So the director's cut really spoon feeds what Richard Kelly's intention was with this story and with this character to a point where it's patronizing and detracts from the beauty of the original film. The one of the strengths of the film is its mystery, is how open it is to interpretation. In preparation for this podcast, I did a lot of research about what the film is actually about, and I strongly disagree with what Richard Kelly says this film is about. If the film is about what he says, I don't like it as much. I like my interpretation of it, and I think another diehard fan's interpretation of it is going to be completely different to mine, but it also might not be what Richard Kelly's was. And I think that's the beauty of this film. It's you take from it what you want it to be. So to be kind of given this prescribed step-by-step answer as to what's going on in the film in the director's cut, it loses its magic, in my opinion.
no, that's totally fair. I think that's, and I sorry to keep going back to David Lynch, but that's why David Lynch doesn't try to explain. That's why artists shouldn't have to explain their work. When you're supposed to find your own interpretation, don't explain anything. If there's a plot and a basic normal narrative, then there's nothing to explain. Everyone understands the same thing. But tell me what Mulholland Drive is about or Blue Velvet. They're going to have different interpretations, and Donnie Darko falls there.
Well, it could also be, I mean, a lot of people said that the reason that he did that was to kind of give everybody the answers that they were looking for. But there's also an interpretation that could be, or an argument that could be made that a big reason why this film got greenlit was because of Drew Barrymore's interest in the script, right? Her production company, and that's what kind of pushed it forward. And I think the reason, or my opinion, is the reason why maybe Richard Kelly hasn't had another successful film since then. I know there's some really diehard fans of Southland Tales. I thought it was an absolute mess and it was nonsense. But I think why he hasn't found any further success could be attributed to some more seasoned industry professionals really guiding his hand with the theatrical release of Donnie Darko, it finding success after the fact, and then him being like, well, this is what I really wanted. And just being able to see how much of a mess the director's cut ended up being, is that a true reflection on actually what his skill set or skill level is as a director? And if so, might be why he's making commercials now, I think.
The thing that I actually enjoyed about the director's cut was the ability to look at the story within the framework of the science that they were playing with at the time, right? The idea of that the book, like the textbook being the world that everything exists within that she wrote, right? That Sparrow wrote. And looking at that as the vehicle for how everything interacts, I think is interesting, actually, right? Like if you look at it as a world that has rules, and those rules are in this book that Grandma Death wrote, right? Um, and looking at it through that framework, so many pieces of it make more sense to me anyway. And again, it takes a little bit of the whimsy out of it for sure. But I think the thing that I appreciate actually is looking at the subtleties of all the little hints you get that you don't know are hints, and how looking at it within the framework of, like when they talk about the idea of of time travel and how technically the idea of us all existing within a linear timeline is like time travel. Like I find that fascinating, right? The idea that they talk about the vessel, anything can be a vessel. We are the vessel, right? And that thing within us that is the passenger, that is, is it predetermined? That interesting. The whole idea of the letter, right? Her going to the mailbox over and over again. And like, would he have written the letter if she didn't do that? Or was she going to the mailbox because he was always going to write the letter? Like, there's those questions, right? That like just kind of burn after a while. The idea of Donnie and Frank, in my opinion, Donnie and Frank are experiencing the same thing. They are both passengers, in my opinion, right? And the idea of it being as stated again, just in the director's cut idea of it being like a tangent world, right? And again, living in that idea that like if this is how the physics work here, right? They're both caught in these because they have that one scene where Frank's in his room and he's got the pictures that he's been drawing of the bunny costume, and he touches the eye, and there's so many things to allude to the fact that if the camera had been somewhere different during the whole movie and we followed Frank instead, right? Like, would he have just been viewing Donnie then? Like, there's so many pieces of it that make you wonder who's caught in whose story. And again, I like the framework that the director's cut gives because it allows you to play with all those little subtle hints and keys, and that image at image at the end of the movie, of the little boy, the little neighbor boy, right, and Gretchen waving, right? And the multiple paths, right? If something changed and so she lived, right? If she didn't, she wouldn't live. But because of that, maybe now that little boy is in danger, right? Because Cunningham is still out in the world because he never got to burn the house down. And just I don't know. Again, I don't know. I feel like I'm not really saying anything, but there's just so many pieces that I think shine through with the understanding that they are all living within a certain physics or whatever you've decided it is. And I find that fascinating as someone who just loves science and the idea of like creating a world inside it, similar to the way that like an Interstellar uses our understanding of, physics in the world to tell the story within it by using it to affect the story. Yeah, fascinating. I loved it. I love both versions, but yeah.
I remember watching this when it first came out, and my older brother, who I think understood and understands film in a different way and in a kind of a better way than me. He was a big Spielberg fan, a big Kubrick fan. He didn't like it. And he said it makes no sense. And what he said, actually, I still agree with. He said that was a very poorly written film with fantastically written scenes. He said that was a film that didn't know what it wanted to do, but it knew how to make interesting scenes, and he didn't like it. And I think that still stands today, that this film had so many fantastic scenes that it makes you love the film, not necessarily the overall narrative that you got from it.
And that's, you know what, that's actually a real parallel to how I felt about it, but in the sense of ideas. There's so many, and as I sort of alluded to at the beginning of my yap, is that it is full of ideas. This is an idea and thematic stew, which maybe that's part of the problem for me, is that there was so much that I wanted to see played out and fulfilled and paid off. Like the adolescent struggle, there's family issues, there's mental health issues, there's love and hate, literally, as discussed in the movie, in that spectrum of emotional responses. There's identity, uh, the fear of being alone, and how that then, as we've discussed, playing into religion and death and social norms. So many things that were touched on. And again, I think it just didn't quite. And when I said it was a mess earlier, I think that's kind of what I meant. And true to form for this podcast, after listening to the rest of you speak about it, it gives me a new appreciation for certain things that I hadn't considered, or hadn't maybe sunk in. But I do feel like it's almost overloaded in the sense of, ambition and wanting to address certain things that for me it didn't effectively address any of them, if you know what I mean. And Ryan, to what you were saying about sort of the internal logic of the physics in the book, I desperately wanted to feel like that was true in the whole tangent universe idea. Like a parallel little splinter, as the sci-fi staple of a split. That's what I assumed it was anyway, of a splinter universe. Again, I can't say I disliked the movie, but I feel like in the hands of Richard Kelly, after he'd had a few years or a few decades of directing and writing experience, might have been um, a little more solid, and may have paid off some of these big ideas in a little for me better way. But I got to say, Hannah, I envy your passion for it, because for people who love this sort of stuff, and again, Tristan mentioning Lynch, that struck me as well too, very Lynchian in some ways. And again, going back to my film school days, and I remember we would watch Eraserhead over and over again, almost to torture ourselves. But I still don't get it, and agreed that artists shouldn't explain themselves. True to that, I feel like we also, we all interpret it our own ways, but we all decide, I think, whether the art succeeds or not. And for me, this one just barely crossed the line, if you know what I mean. So, of pass fail, but so interesting, and so again, loving to hear everyone else's experiences.
I think it's really interesting, James, hearing your take as someone who watched it for the first time as an adult, because I think that for me, I'm always going to view this film with kind of nostalgia tinted glasses. I watched it when I was very young, and much like Donnie, trying to figure out where I kind of fit in the world. You kind of are convinced at that age that you're invincible and that you're going to, be a rock star or a superstar. You're going to, achieve so many things. Um, but are still coming to terms with your place in it all. And Donnie goes on this journey. He acts out against authority. He has these streaks of rebellion. The scene with Jim Cunningham, the Antichrist scene, is just it just sings to any teenager who has ever felt like an outsider in the world. And obviously, I mean, I think most of us, even the most popular kids in school, probably felt like an outsider at some point. And so I think if you're of a certain age when you watch this film for the first time, you're going to forgive it a lot more than I think you probably forgave it, James. So when you're saying things like, I wanted so much more for it, perhaps if I had seen it for the first time as an adult, I would be more on the level with you. But I forgave it so much as a teenager because at that age, much like you said, Tristan, the concept of it was mind blowing. I hadn't been exposed to anything quite so non-linear before, quite so um, out of the box. And it came in the package of a very good looking Jake Gyllenhaal, who was a kid around my age who I did not mind looking on at the screen about either. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear your take because I do consider it one of my favorite films. I don't think that it's completely perfect. I do recognize its flaws. I don't think I'd agree with your brother Tristan about that it's not very well written overall. But I do agree that it is just scene after scene of hits. Like there's as the film goes through, I was rewatching it the other night with my husband, and he was just scrolling on his phone, which, was making my vein pulse in the side of my head a little bit because every time a new scene would be coming on, I'd be like, oh, you've got to watch this one. This is great. And then the next scene would come on and it'd be like the I'm voting for Dukakis. Oh, well, just put your phone down for a second because this is absolutely fantastic. And then the head over heels scene, just watch this one. A fear and love exercise telling Miss Farmer to shove it up. Like, great. There's so many hits after hit after hit. And again, watching it as an adult now, did I love it because of the nostalgia I felt towards it as a child, teenager, or do I love it because actually it's kind of great? And I think the more sensible version of me would say it's probably somewhere in the middle between those two.
I think that is a very wise and very self-aware assessment, and I certainly have my own versions of that as well too. That I would look back and go, "Oh yeah, that's a nostalgia watch or a guilty pleasure."
Anyway, great pick. Great pick. That was,
I think it was
thanks.
a fantastic pick. Are you still you're pleased that you picked it, James?
Oh yeah, 100%. And despite my misgivings, I enjoyed it, and I've really enjoyed the discussion with you guys, especially having somebody like Hannah join us who is a diehard fan of it. Like, yeah, by no means did I hate this movie at all, and I'm totally like I watched it twice to prepare for this because I felt it was worth it. I felt there was enough there to warrant a thoughtful, in-depth discussion. Whereas some picks, not so much. I might watch it once and say a few perfunctory comments, and that would be it. But there's absolutely a lot here to see and appreciate.
All right. Well, do we know what movie we're watching next?
I do got to do it now, but I will just tell you the ones that I'm not doing so that you can know that. Eraserhead, I'm not doing. I love that came up.
Oh no!
I'm also not doing, and Tristan, I'm very sorry. I'm not doing Enemy Mine.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
I do like that
yeah,
film, but it's all right.
And because we can't be another bunch of white guys talking about Star Wars, I'm not doing Empire. I'm not fucking doing it. I'm sorry. I refuse. If you do a Star Wars episode, I'm not going to be on it.
I'm fine with that too. I'm not.
Now here's the thing
Wars.
though, and I don't want to put Hannah on the spot because like we just are in recording now, and like if you don't want to, it's fine, totally cool. I will not be offended. However, if you would join us, I want to do Edge of Tomorrow, another modern Tom Cruise vehicle.
Tom Cruise running.
Tom Cruise running
right,
in a
yes.
mech suit.
I love
So-
it. Honestly, I could probably say a lot of Edge of Tomorrow word for word.
Amazing. Perfect. Yeah. So there was a bunch of different things on the tip of my tongue, and I kind of just wanted to pick something a little more modern and something a little more popcorn. And that's definitely both those things with some fun sci-fi undertones. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to be Edge of Tomorrow. But yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna watch Eraserhead by myself then.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
That was fun. Are you a Donnie Darko fan, or are you on the other side? Either way, we appreciate that you listened to this episode. Email us sometime. Let us know any other movies that you think we should be talking about. We'd love to hear from you. Also, join us for our book episodes, and as usual, we have interviews with authors and filmmakers, so join us another time. We'll be here. Thank you for listening. Until next time.